Welcome to the Convergence Podcast. I'm your host, Ashok Sivanand.
They try to prompt, and now they're in this loop that never resolves, it doesn't converge. You've got power tools, and you're trying to use the drill with the screw bit, and you're drilling something in, and you're like, oh, I need a half turn. Pick up the screwdriver and just turn it a half, half rotation.
On this show, we'll deconstruct the best practices, principles, and the underlying philosophies behind the most engaged product teams who ship the most successful products. This is what teams are made of. On the very day that OpenAI opened their platform to let consumers buy products directly inside ChatGPT, Shopify was ready. Their customers, the merchants who have e-commerce stores that they power, went live the very same day with their products. That single move says a lot about how Shopify operates, not just as a tech company, but one that's built to stay relevant for decades. They move quickly, but they also move with intent. They experiment in public, and they build systems that learn faster than their competitors and even their technology vendors. Welcome back to Convergence, folks. Today I'm joined once again by Shopify's head of engineering, Farhan Thawar. We talk about what it means to build a company of what he calls AI centaurs, or humans using AI as an extension of their own ability to think, design, build, and most importantly, to ship. How do you create an environment where people know when to reach for AI, but also when to put it down? How do you enable learning about AI across every team, whether it's finance, sales, HR, and not just R&D and engineering? And why is it that companies that adopt technology and new paradigms early end up learning a lot faster and gaining the real advantage of being first? We also get to dig into the human side of scaling a company with a peek into Shopify's culture. Why showing unfinished work builds better teams, why certainty can be considered intolerance, and why subtraction, or removing rather than adding more, often creates the biggest breakthroughs. And for fun, we wrapped up with a rapid fire round made specifically for leaders who are trying to transform their business. We covered topics like how responsibility is more important than accountability, and what great leaders can actually learn from their interns. If you're trying to build a tech-enabled company that lasts through the next decade of change, one that uses AI and technology and culture intentionally, this conversation will give you a clear picture of what that looks like in practice. Here is a super insightful and entertaining conversation with Farhan Thawar, the head of engineering at Shopify. Subscribe to the podcast to get future episodes as soon as they're published. If you find this helpful, give the podcast a 5-star rating on your podcast app or hit that like button on YouTube. Hey man, welcome back. Our episode, the last time you came on, was one of the most viewed. I get a lot of, probably the most calls about certain quotes you said. So we're deciding to rewire it a little bit. Okay. I wanted to start with something a little bit topical. There's articles that came out August last month of 25 that Coinbase has terminated, or they're kind of starting to fire people that are not using AI. Yeah. And anyone who read Tobi's memo, it was only 4 months ago. I had to double check that was just in April of this year. Yep. Feels like forever. Anyone who read that memo should not be super surprised about how the industry is trending. And maybe start with your take on that.
Yeah. So I think, that's quite aggressive. One of the things that we said in the memo, right? Tobi's memo, is that we have a baseline expectation of using AI. And I really think about that as I want to reduce the latency to AI reflexivity. How quickly can you reach for AI when you're stuck with a problem? I don't want you to wait a long time because AI could probably help you more quickly. And so the baseline expectation means that if you have two people, one using AI and one not using AI, they will both be evaluated the same. Meaning the person without AI is going to be evaluated as if they had AI tooling as well, right? A good analogy is like chess. Imagine you and I are playing chess and I said, you can use a computer if you want, right? like we probably both use the computer because like the computer, like Magnus Carlsen can't even beat his own phone at this point, right? And so, but it's possible to do a great job and really crush the impact that you have without AI. So we're not forcing people. We're just saying we're going to evaluate you as if you have AI, and we want you to embrace these tools because imagine how much more you can get done when you have these power tools. The converse of that, by the way, is that you still have to know how to use the hand tools, right? I have seen people get into a rut whereby they could quickly hand fix something, right, without prompting. And instead they try to prompt, and now they're in this like loop that never resolves, like it doesn't converge. And now you've actually like, you know, it's the analogy for me is that you've got power tools and you're trying to like, you know, use the drill with the screw bit and you're drilling something in and you're like, oh, I need like a half turn. It's pretty hard to do with a power tool, do a half turn. Like, let me like, oh, too much, too little. Like, pick up the screwdriver and just turn it a half, like, you know, half rotation. That you need to know when to do that. And so, I don't know if this is going to be one of your questions, but so one of the things we try to do is figure out how do we ensure that people have the baseline expectation across the different types of problems? So almost like AI not allowed problems, almost like, hey, the AI is just not good at this. So how do we make sure you're good at solving problems by yourself without AI because just AI is not there yet, or we need you to have a base level understanding of what's going on. AI optional problems whereby you could do it yourself, or AI could help you. When to pull it in, when is it useful, when is it going to be accurate, how do I check it? And then AI mandatory, like super giant problems that in the time you want to work on this are not going to be able to be solved without AI. And so I need people to kind of go through those three scenarios and be able to float between those areas quickly. And so being AI native helps you do that. But when do I pick up the hand screwdriver and just go half turn?
And to some extent, you know, given how intense y'all have been and disciplined around the adoption, I kind of feel like we've kind of we're talking to folks with the 10,000 iterations or 10,000 prompts from the future.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, like, what are examples that come to mind in each of those three buckets in a more like practical, like development sense?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so one example coding is a good example, right? When you're coding, whether it's vibe coding, vibe coding typically means you're not really looking at the code, but if for anything that you're shipping to production, right, you should. I don't know if you saw the Cloudflare outage that they posted an RCA on where basically like a front-end engineer or non-engineer like vibe coded something and it caused like something to spin out of control and cause an outage. And so you're putting something to production, you should know what the code does, right? At a high level, you should know what's actually happening there. And what I've seen happen is people writing code, they prompt to get most of the coding done, which is amazing. We want them to do that, get a lot of work done. They inspect the code or their test case is failing. And instead of noticing that actually they can quickly fix it by looking at the code and saying, oh, actually, I see what went wrong here, they try to continually prompt and prompt and prompt. And by the way, it's good to start that way. Hey, cursor, fix this, error. But at the same time, if you looked at it and noticed something quickly, you might be able to address it in a more direct way. And LLMs are not so good at elegant, architecturally sound design patterns yet. And so by continuing to prompt, you might actually end up overbuilding and complexifying whatever you're trying to build anyway. And I'm a big fan of vibe coding to prototype and having coding assistants help you with boilerplate code, but trying to actually just put things in production, vibe code only, is like super hard. And so I try to tell people when they tell me like, I haven't written any code. I'm like, really? And then when you probe, they're like, okay, they've used AI for like 95% of it, but that 5% is super important, right? There was that tweet from Kent Beck who said, I feel like 90% of my skill has gone to zero value, but the last 10% is 1,000 times more valuable. That last 5 to 10%, which is super important for you to still hold, it's that skill of, right? I can't remember that famous, what was it, Pablo Picasso or some ad guy or whatever, was like, they asked them to design a logo and in 15 minutes, design the logo, and they said that'll be $500,000. I'm like, what? You only spent 15 minutes? He goes, no, I've been spending 40 years learning how to do that.
100%. With respect to, you touched on architecture, and something I've been wondering about is, before AI came around, even for reading code, readability was a big trade-off compared to performance.
Yeah.
And now we've got like readers with AI copilots and assistants. And I'm wondering if you're seeing that kind of shift in terms of like favoring more performance because we feel like the computer is going to read it. But at the same time, you mentioned elegance and design pattern. So what's the new paradigm there?
I think eventually, my prediction is eventually we'll go to a place where we can't, not only can we so we won't care about the code. Not only will we not care, we actually won't be able to read it. Like, I actually think we'll get to a point where it's like machine to machine translation. Like right now, you don't look at like assembly, right? Because we just trust now that the compiler takes your language and turns it into machine code. I think we'll get there here as well, where eventually it'll just be you code something, it's written in some very terse, almost cryptic machine speak. The machine interprets it and then runs it. I think we will get there, kind of like a compiler. But I think for now, we're at the stage of like drunk intern stage. That's the code that's being written. And so the drunk intern's writing code. You got to understand it. And you got to fix it. And you have to maintain it. And you have to put guardrails around the architecture. And you have to say, why are you doing that dumb thing? And so that's where we are today. But it's going to change very quickly. It's going to change to, I don't think this part is quickly where you're just unreadable machine code, but it will become much, much better than a staff engineer, than a principal engineer. It's just keep going up the stack. It'll be simple. It'll be elegant, but we're still going to want to read it. We're going to be like, wow, this really is phenomenal code. I wonder like who wrote it, and you'll realize it's the AI, right? I mean, imagine taking like a giant code. Imagine I took the entire Shopify code base and loaded it in to an LLM and said, like, if you could start over using modern design practices and modern cloud systems and modern machine learning, how would you rewrite all of Shopify? Right? And what would it look like? Whatever. And imagine it spit out like something that was elegant and 10 times smaller as a code base. Like imagine the win for everybody, right? Performance, simplicity, reliability, maintainability, all those things, and people working on new functionality. Like, that would be amazing. So I think we'll get there. We're not there yet.
You mentioned sort of assembly, and you might like this. Sometimes I hang out with my more nerdy friends, and we'll like
more nerdier than me.
That's hard to find, but you're a busy guy.
Yeah.
So we'll hang out, and instead of pairing on code, we'll pair talking to an LLM, and just like it's so much easier to learn about history and other things when we have an LLM on the side, right? And one of the things we kind of went down a rabbit hole was like in the 60s, some of the pushback for assembly programmers to go to kind of the higher level languages, as like Fortran and stuff coming out, were performance and security. There was a determinism aspect. It's different from here, but it's the same thing. There was craft of like, a real engineer kind of writes the hard things. There was the job market of like, no one's going to hire high level. Why should I do that? And then you had to think differently. And it wasn't until like the late 70s that the adoption curve kind of went more mainstream, where it was mostly like the assembly level programmers were hard to find and made a ton of money, but mostly high level. And that really put into context that it's a very similar kind of transition, and humans are kind of predictable. Maybe the bell curve is going to be kind of leaner, maybe not, but it seems so similar.
It is similar, except for one thing: compilers are deterministic, and LLMs are not. So that's one big difference. And it wasn't just the 70s, right? Like I was writing assembly all in the 90s. And I remember I did a real-time course in 97 at Waterloo. And we had I had the CPO manual beside me, because what was happening is whenever we were writing in real-time code, you really care about every instruction. You can't have any non-deterministic memory allocation and deallocation, because those are not like O1 operations. And I kept running into bugs. And I would have to like look at the assembly and actually modify the compiler optimization flags because it was doing the wrong thing. And I finally tried every flag and gave up and had to do inline assembly in C because the compiler would not do the thing that I wanted to do. So that's where we are now in this world, where I'm like, hey, I can't prompt, right? Now in that case, imagine the compiler not doing what you want to do, which is deterministic. Now imagine an LM, which would, not only is it non-deterministic, that literally means every time you run it or every subsequent run, it might give you a different answer. So you do want to, we do need to figure this out. We will figure this out. I'm an optimist here. It's going to be amazing. The world of software engineering has completely changed. When you talk to people now who are on the edge, they're like, I'm not an engineer anymore. I manage a team of agents, right? That's where we're going. But I don't think we're at the edge of that now. It's going to become much more prevalent.
My first job out of university was at this company, ShopLogics, and we had like an embedded device. And so coming out of electrical engineering, at school, you're kind of forced to learn machine assembly code. Yeah. And so going into an embedded atmosphere wasn't that hard. It was very different from the other internships and everything I did, where we're writing at a much higher level.
Yeah.
Certainly. But I think that was this was also kind of it was an IoT company, but IoT even as a phrase hadn't come around. Another thing that I'm wondering about. So last time we talked about this almost tongue in cheek about like you were one of the top Ruby code bases, I believe. And that was not a matter of pride.
No.
And, something that you're looking, we'll get to subtraction in a bit, but now you're also one of the top AI token consumers, which is a matter of pride. And
yeah, I don't know if that's true. How do we know if we're the top token consumer? I think we do the following. We don't like waste, but we don't have limits, right? We're like, if you believe in your workflow, you can effectively use the right best model for your problem solving, whether that's coding or something else, go at it. We don't have limits. We do share daily leaderboards of like who's spending the most tokens today type thing. And it's a point of pride if you're on the leaderboard because you actually hopefully use that to your advantage to get your work done. But it doesn't mean you should run a script or you forgot something running. Remember the early days of EC2 where somebody would run something and then come back at the end of the month like, oh shit, I forgot to turn the EC2 off and like I got a bill for like a few $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
That's possible in this world if you've got some long running process or something that you forgot was hitting the LLM and generating tokens. So we're still in the early days, but we are for sure on the other side. I'd rather you err on the side of using too many tokens. Use one of the biggest things we tell people is like switch off the auto model and cursor and move to a real model because you're going to get much better results. And we want people to use the right model for their use case. So now, are we the biggest token consumer company-wise by person? I don't know. I have no idea.
I'm going to interrupt the conversation here to talk about three things that I think are relevant to that conversation I'm having with Farhan. The first is a fun little coincidence that while at the time of recording a few weeks ago, we didn't know for sure, and it was just a rumor, that Shopify was indeed one of the leading consumers of AI tokens. OpenAI happened to release a list of their top consumers, a leaderboard of their customers, if you will. And surely enough, the rumor was validated that Shopify was on the list. So that's something maybe Farhan didn't know at the time, but OpenAI released a list that cleared up the doubt for us, coincidentally, just a couple of days after we recorded. The second thing is a series of terms that we're about to get into. And I wanted to give you a little bit more of a layperson definition so that more of it makes sense. The first is an LLM proxy, and the second is an MCP server. LLM proxy, or large language model proxy, is a way by which Shopify enables their employees, all of their LLM and AI users, to have access to all of the largely approved models, whether it's OpenAI's various models, whether it's open source models like Llama, or other ones from competitors like Claude, all through the same sort of access point. You can even plug this into your applications that you're building that use the LLM so that you can easily switch between the different LLMs, either because some have different skills and benefits that are different for different use cases, or even like a backup redundancy in case one of them goes down and you can switch to another one. This also means that Shopify's leadership has some level of visibility that the underlying LLMs are not training off of the data that's being built or being developed with the Shopify applications or the various users, as well as other security and privacy concerns are being addressed. So essentially, from a Shopify employee standpoint, they have one proxy that they go to, and if they realize they want to try it out on a different LLM, maybe switch from OpenAI and ChatGPT into Claude and Anthropic, they're able to do that really quickly without a ton of reconfiguration. It's something that a number of tech companies are doing, and I think are going to enable the speed of learning and progress for their employees a lot faster than if you try to go about hitting them individually. The second thing we're about to touch on right now are MCP servers, or Model Context Protocol servers. In other words, this is a way by which you can have a tool that you're already running, something like maybe Salesforce or HubSpot, interact with the LLMs through something similar to an API, wherein you can ask questions of the various tools that are already on your network through a chat interface or through some kind of AI interface if you're automating things, wherein the data that your AI tooling has access to is not limited to the training that the providers like OpenAI have done for their models, but you can augment and complement it with the relevant data from your actual business, like the example that Farhan is about to share. So hopefully the definitions of LLM proxy and MCP server help understand the next few topics he's about to cover and the benefits that Shopify gets from them.
But we do encourage people, and we have an LLM proxy set up such that all the models are available. We try to deprecate the ones that don't make sense anymore. We connect with all of the providers, I had a fireside chat with Grok today. We want to make sure people get access to the latest and greatest, inference cloud technology as well, because use cases get unlocked when you have super fast inference. We work with open source models, closed source models. Like, we have everything under the sun. And then we use them via the enterprise API, so you can feel safe that you're not leaking your data to a model that's going to train on that data. And we teach everybody. We have a lot of enablement, whether it's R&D, of course, tends to be more curious and tool users, but then sales, finance, operations, recruiting, HR, those teams are adopting Cursor. They're adopting other workflows, and we're making it easy for them to level up, even if they don't want to install Cursor, but lots of them install Cursor. Like, it's surprising how many people, hundreds and hundreds of non-R&D people who install Cursor and use it daily, because we have MCP servers connecting to all the data. So you could be a salesperson, connect your calendar, Salesforce and GitHub and other places, our wiki, and ask questions. So like, hey, what account should I work on today? What's happening with this feature in the roadmap? Do we have, we have a thing called Scout in support. You can say, hey, what's the number one merchant frustration in the billing area? And it can start aggregating and going through that data and sharing with you from live customer data what the biggest pain points are. And we can be like, wow, a lot of support tickets created about this. What if we made the product better and we could reduce the support load because the product's just easier to use?
So there's a few things I want to double click on here. You mentioned a number of different infrastructures. And so compared to more traditional companies, they're instead of enabling it for their engineers, they're negotiating with OpenAI, and they spend 6 months deciding who to double down and do their enterprise license. You've kind of opened them all up. And then you've also got MCP server enabled, making it really easy to get access to any data or most data in the company. Yeah. So how did that all what was the thought framework behind opening everything up, including this MCP server?
Yeah. On the first one, actually, it's not normal for Shopify to try to go after every vendor. I know a lot of companies whereby, let's say, you use Google Docs, but then some other teams using Notion, and then you've got Google Sheets and some other tools using Airtable, some other teams using Airtable. I've seen that happen in a lot of companies. Actually, I saw it happen in Shopify as well. We had a very concerted effort to narrow down to fewer tools, but everybody's on the same tool chain. Because what would happen is you'd move from one team to another, and you're like, oh, how do I get access to this thing? And you're like, all of a sudden it's in Notion instead of Google Docs, and things would get fragmented. And of course, the cost, right? You'd have these huge licenses for the same tool. So we did a good job getting rid of that. But then when AI came around, it wasn't clear actually what the use cases are and which model was good for which use case, right? You can imagine everybody people to use Claude Code for coding, but then use OpenAI for architecture or, writing or for thinking about something, especially in an O3. And so we didn't feel like we had sufficient reason to have fewer models. So instead we said, let's have an LLM proxy. It'll pick just the generic model for you to use if you don't pick one, but you could also say, how I want to use Anthropic, I want to use OpenAI, I want to use Cohere, I want to use Grok with a K, whatever you want. So that was the first one thing, and of course we had enterprise agreements. And then what I did was I went out to all the clouds and all the LLM providers and said, hey, we need to have an agreement because we want to add it to our LLM proxy. And then I also went to the cloud services because I wanted to have redundancy, right? Because if you build a production application now on OpenAI and OpenAI goes down, now what? You have functionality that users are relying upon, whether it's buyers or merchants. So we now back up. I think I said this in the article. We back up OpenAI to Azure AI. We back up Anthropic to Anthropic on Vertex. We can back up these things into different clouds so that we know it's now turning into like a production system, right? Like we have we can rely on it. And then on the MCP thing, one of the interesting things that I saw happening was that everybody came out with their own AI tool. Slack, Salesforce, Google G Suite with Gemini, like every tool you talk to, they have an AI thing. And there's a few things that are interesting about that. One, it operates inside that tool only, right? So you go to Salesforce AI, it operates on Salesforce data, right? Which is great.
Yep.
If you want to do that. But two things are going on. One, it only operates on that data. And then two, you have to pay for it. So I have to go around and I got to pay 10 to, I've seen $100 per user per month for AI inside a specific tool. Now, it's great for the tool because you get money, it operates on the data. The tool gets smarter over time by seeing what kind of things we do. They always have hey, we don't really train on your data, but we can aggregate, like, figure out what you're doing and train on it, which again is better for the tool and better for the industry because they're doing it. But we're not getting better. The tool is getting better. We're paying them. Shopify is not actually getting better. We get efficiency gain. So instead, we took a different approach. And we said, what if we centralized all that work so Shopify can get smarter and the data that is ours in those tools is used to make Shopify smarter. And so what we do, for example, is we started this by creating our own MCP servers. But by the way, a lot of these vendors now have their own, right? GitHub has its own MCP server. We created our own first. Yep. I can now query GitHub from Cursor. And guess what? In my application, I can query GitHub, my wiki, my emails. Maybe I want to look at G Suite and Calendar. Maybe I want to look at Salesforce, other tools. I have a data portal MCP, which is all of our data, our customer data. And now when I'm in Cursor, I'm asking questions. Shopify, like my instance of Cursor, like my tools I'm building is getting smarter because I have all this data now. And Shopify is getting smarter because we can see what LLMs are being used, what's being built. I share it back to our shared channels. And now I feel like our data in those tools is available to me to build the amazing experiences I want to build. And Shopify itself is getting an uplift in intelligence as a company versus, and again, nothing wrong with Salesforce selling their AI thing. It's just that if I use it in there, Salesforce gets better. I need Shopify to get better. And so now I can just pull that Salesforce data and make Shopify centrally smarter. And we have teams that focus on the LLM infra, Libra Chat, which is the open source tool we use to build our chat infrastructure. We use, I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, we connect to all the clouds. So we have all the LLMs that are available. We also have local models. We have a GPU cluster that you can use. We have a tooling for experimentation. We have all that stuff so that Shopify can get smarter versus just the individual tools.
Awesome. And do you find that people like record differently, document differently now that they know that there's this like downstream MCP access versus or I know you guys were always like a writing culture compared to the average company. Yeah. You find that there's a shift now that like, hey, I know this is going to go somewhere. And
I don't know if we're writing. I think we're definitely collateral culture. There's a lot of like collateral, whether it's a deck or writing or demo or visual to describe something. So we definitely have a lot of collateral. Do people change? I mean, one thing that you would expect is like if I record a meeting versus not record a meeting, you do see a slight difference in the way people interact in the meeting. I think that at the beginning, I think over time people forget the recording is on and then they get more comfortable. But so part of that will come as well when you've got like Gemini in your Google Meet or the transcript of the meeting is then going to be likely be used in AI later to summarize, like, maybe you take all the transcript of something and summarize it. Maybe you're a salesperson and all of these interactions with a certain client, you're going to take all the transcripts and then you're going to compare it to like the best deals that have ever happened in Shopify from a coaching perspective and say, hey, what could I have done better to either close this deal faster, align the value of Shopify to this client, see if they're a fit or not. Maybe you win the deal, maybe you don't, maybe you could have negotiated differently, but like get coaching, not just on sales, by the way, on any of your disciplines. And so I think the way to think about that is that you want to make sure that the tools are available. I'm hoping people don't change the way they work because they feel like there's more observability happening, but it's a net positive for them. Like a good example is like when I just leave a meeting, I'm like, oh crap, what were the action items? I can quickly ask Gemini in a Google Meet, hey, what were the takeaways from this thing? And you remember, oh yeah, or you can cut it into a Google Doc or something. So I think it's likely that some behavior is changing. I'm hoping it's not that much because if you take the growth mindset approach,
Mm-hmm.
you want to get feedback on how you're doing, and you want to be in this iterative process where the feedback then changes your behavior, and then you get more feedback and you change your behavior to a point where you're actually getting better at your job.
Part of it is also around like what the implications are of something sensitive being recorded and stuff, right? And so if you're not taking like an overly harsh approach and it's like a gentle nudge of feedback or something like you said, then I think that's another cultural thing.
Yeah.
Which
that
is not
that was true on recording though also, right? Like recording a meeting
exactly
was true, but now the difference is, so here's the difference.
There's value to recording.
Yeah, there's value to recording, but now there's a huge difference. You could, let's say we're on a team and we meet every week.
Mm-hmm.
And we record every week's meeting. It's harder for me to be like, hey, I just noticed like Ashok never asks for my opinion, right? And it's hard to see, but imagine I have like 26 meetings for a year. I can go, hey, over the 26 meetings, can you check to see if Ashok has always asked everyone for their opinion but me?
Mm-hmm.
So you can kind of do these weird types of analysis now that might, and by the way, might be good for you to highlight that because you might be like, oh, crap, I didn't realize, because it turns out Farhan and I have known each other for 10 years and I just assumed he would always tell me and put his hand up, but he doesn't. And so I need to do a better job of that. But I'm just saying these kinds of meta-analysis could be useful to do that you would probably never do manually.
1,000%. You know, I've got like this ADHD thing that I need to be typing all the time. Like even right now when you're talking, I'm typing not because I need the notes, we're recording, but it just helps my brain process. So I've got like 5-6 years of therapy notes. And so I've been feeding that in there, and it gives me exactly those trends that you're saying. And the second thing that comes to mind is like, if you and I are having a hard conversation and you come to me and say, you never ask me questions.
Yeah.
That's not very specific, or, you know, it's not necessarily having us look at the same thing. So I might be more defensive versus like, hey, I ran the thing and I noticed that like, you know, 5 times out of 7, you're not doing this thing. And I might be like, dude, sorry, like, and let's come to the table and have a collaborative decision versus like being defensive. Fostering an engaged product organization and aligning them with the principles around lean, human-centered design, and agile will more than likely lead to successful business outcomes for your organization. But getting started or getting unblocked can be hard. This podcast is brought to you by the player coaches over at Integral. They help ambitious companies like you build amazing product teams and ship products in artificial intelligence, cloud, web, and mobile. Listeners to the podcast can head on over to integral.io/convergence and get a free product success lab. During this session, the Integral team will facilitate a problem-solving exercise that gives you clarity and confidence to solve a product, design, or engineering problem. That's integral.io/convergence. Now, back to the show. You know, I've got this series of like, call it rapid fire here, because the culture is so different. And then there's like a thought exercise of like, say, I've been working with a lot more like mid-market CEOs recently, right? Versus the enterprise folks that you and I worked with. And these are sometimes folks that took over a business from their parents. Maybe they were put in as a CEO, and culture change is a big part. And mental models and technology, I think, are like a couple of things that I tend to follow you a lot, and I learned a lot from you about. So let's just imagine you're, a good friend of yours is taking this over, and you get a chance to like teach him these things or her these things. So hopefully not definitions and more stories. I'm just gonna run stuff at you and then just give me your reaction. Right. First one is responsibility versus accountability.
This is like a famous quote from, I think, Norway teacher, or who revamped the system, said there's no such thing as responsibility without accountability. So accountability is what's left once responsibility is taken away.
Yeah.
And so basically for me, and I did a quote this week on Twitter about responsibility, which is basically like you can share responsibility, but you can never fully give it away. And so an example of that is, what's one right now? I mean, right now, here's a good one. We're talking internally about how designers and PMs are now shipping PRs and engineering, and we need to figure out a way to make it valuable for both sides, because I don't want to ship a 7K PR that an engineer has to read but I do want them vibe coding because I think there's value in both sides, right? So now this is going to happen all over the company, right? I want to make sure that we fix this problem. It's not totally like my problem, right? I could be like, oh, it's like, let me assign it to this person, that person. But the way that I work is that I will make sure I don't have to be the one who solves it, but I'm responsible for getting it resolved. Yep. And so what that means is even if I pull in 3 people to help me kind of draft the doc, it's up to me to kind of continue to be responsible, and you can never really give it away. And so that's the big difference. And I don't find it's easy. I think the opposite can happen in a lot of companies where like you have a team underneath you that you don't understand what they do. You don't know the job. You've never done the job. You're accountable for the outcome. And I find that if you're going to be accountable, it's better to be responsible, which means like be in the work of that team. So in this example, I'd rather be in the meetings when they're talking about it and be part of the solution to be like, how are we going to do this? Then I can come back and say like, here's the solve versus like the team created it. Here's the doc.
So I could have given you a story about this one and my first week at Extreme.
Yeah.
I forget what meeting it was. Well, you were at the whiteboard and you picked up a whiteboard marker and the marker didn't work. Yep. And you just put the cap back on and walked over and threw it in the garbage. And it was a non-issue. I looked around and no one made a big deal about it. And for whatever reason, every job I'd had before, the person would have just put it back and grabbed another one.
Of course,
and then
that's insane.
It was a slightly different thing, but I just kind of knew in that moment that, hey, like this was and for me, I'd worked at the previous job for 6 years. So it was a big leap to come to Extreme. And that was the moment where I just kind of knew like, hey, I found home. This is the right place to work. And then it was like, you were a VP of the company. So it was also like modeling behavior that I got to see in my first week at work. Okay.
You're going to laugh because I have a better whiteboard story for you. When, we had gone through iterations to be acquired at Extreme, you remember this, and they interviewed a few people. And one of the power moves for us was always bringing our own whiteboard markers.
Totally.
So we went into like Meta and we went into Google when they were looking at acquiring Extreme, and the markers always suck, right? Yep. So I'd go into there and they'd be like, let's write some code. I'm like, cool. And then they're like, oh, grab a marker. I'm like, oh, I brought my own. And I'd have like fine tip, super high quality markers. And it was always a super power move, but it was the same thing. We're just like, I really care about this. I'm going to bring the best tools.
Dude, this is hilarious. Also because like, I went through the acquisition recently too. And one of the meetings I had, I just have this bag that I bring that has marker, Sharpies, the whole thing, the playbook that you taught us. And one thing I had in there was an HDMI cable.
Yes.
And this meeting was set up and the TV wasn't working. Yep. And, they were all apologizing. And I got up and I just plugged in my own HDMI cable. Yep. And we didn't have a lot of time to do this meeting. There were board members and everyone there. Yep. And it was such a flex, like you said. And it created a very different impression that words and spreadsheets and stuff could not kind of.
I have a universal cable in my bag right now, plus a USB-A to USB-C adapter.
Oh yeah, for sure.
In my bag.
Okay. Next one. Certainty is intolerance.
Well, I mean, one of the things that happens to people is they get so sure of their idea that they're not open to new ideas, right? So even in people like us, right? Like we've been around. Like a good example is pair programming. I'm like, I love pair programming. I'm the biggest pair programming advocate. I ran the biggest pair programming office in the world. I'm a huge pair programming fan. But I have to admit that there are times when pair programming is not the right answer. And so what certainty is intolerance means, like you just literally are not open to new ideas. And one of the things I came around to here was like, Tobi and I spent lots of time convincing folks to do more pair programming. But we also realized Shopify is a culture whereby we want to do more wayfinding than we have certainty. So at Extreme, we had like, here's a product on iOS in many ways, rebuild it on Android. We knew the spec. We just had to execute. But at Shopify, we're like, let's create more entrepreneurs. And so we wayfind and we start going, we think we're going that way. And then we start going that way. And sometimes that's conducive to pair programming because you're exploring a technical domain. But sometimes it requires you to like be creative in other ways, in which case pair programming might actually slow you down. And so trying to be too certain about something can lead you to like closed-mindedness and actually being like landing on like a local maxima versus like saying, you know what, actually I never thought about that. Let me take it away and rethink. And it's very much growth versus fixed mindset. Can I just be open to like new ideas? I mean, another example right now in education that I'm spending some time on is this company called Alpha School out of Texas, where they talk about how the problem with education is teachers. And you're like, what? I thought like you listen to everybody, Bill Gates and everybody, like best teachers shape your career. I feel like a great teacher helped shape my career. But in their mind, they're like, yeah, you need guides, you need adults to help you think. But like the academics should be taught by like computers and AI, and the guide should help you with projects and like the rest of your wayfinding. And I was like, so counterintuitive, and I kind of took me a while to internalize. I'm like, it's possible that this also works, but it's against the orthodoxy. And having certainty really stops you from that. If you just think teachers are the best, like a good teacher is the only thing that can fix education, then you might miss this other opportunity.
Fair enough. The next one is demoing work early and often.
Yeah. So this is something actually I learned I think I learned it at Extreme, but I didn't have the right words. Like at Extreme Labs, we always demoed to our clients every single week, or at least starting in week 2. And I never appreciated it till I got to Shopify, where Tobi has this word where he says this phrase. He goes, I want to see it at 20%, not 80%.
Yeah.
Because if you see it at 80%, there's so many things that are already locked in that I'm not going to be able to mentally pivot you away from those things because all the work has gone in and there's sunk cost. And we inadvertently did it at Extreme because we showed people things every week that they were not used to it, number one, because they're used to like big deliverables at the end. But they had an opportunity to pivot the product as it was being built very early on. And so just the phrasing of I want to see it at 20%, not 80%, forces people to be like, oh, you want to see it super early. And so what I try to do too is I'm also like, everybody wants to show finished work, man. Right? But now I did it today. We had like a long doc. I think it was 15 pages. I grabbed one page of the summary and I sent it to somebody and I said, hey, by the way, this is the direction it's going in. I'm not ready to share the doc yet, but like, and they're like, whoa, I now see where this is going. And multiple things could have happened. They could have said, this is all I need. Stop. Actually, it's going the wrong direction. Actually, I want access to the doc now because I want to comment. Like all of those things were possible. And I just luckily was like, oh, this is just this 20% version. Right? Actually, I'll have you an even funnier one. When I got to Shopify in 2019, I was planning out recruiting. And you probably know this. I was running a big recruiting program in 2021. But I created something called 5-minute model. They're like, how many people should we hire? And I was just like, well, let me think, like engineers, managers, directors, VPs. I created some ratios. I literally called it the 5-minute model and I sent it. And it became like the basis of like all of how recruiting worked for the next X number of years. But I called it 5-minute model because it was like the 20% version. And they were like, everyone was like, this is a better modeling than what we already had. Let's just use it. And I didn't have to do more. I could have spent weeks on that model. But the 5-minute model was enough. And so the 20% version was fine. And demoing gets you that if you start at the beginning, not at the end. Meaning demo as you build versus I'm only going to demo in starting week 10 of 12. Demo in week 1, demo in week 2. Get people used to like seeing the process.
And this is something I learned that, when you're in the kind of leadership role, like we used to think demoing was like showcasing our progress. And, it was an accountability responsibility thing of like, hey, don't worry, we're getting work done. But a big part of the value is the learning, not necessarily the artifact. I copied that from your last time on here. And as a leader, sometimes I would like write down like really fully formed, like strong-manned arguments to help myself. But I have to reverse engineer and pair it back to like, how would I put this on a whiteboard? Because I realized if I came in too strong and too sophisticated, the team would just be like, okay, I guess this is what we're doing. This seems well thought through. And that's not what I wanted. I wanted everyone to kind of provide feedback and have ownership of it. So I had to kind of go back to say, okay, now how do I provide the pencil sketch version of this when I'm communicating it? Because something about making it too sophisticated or elegant made people think it was the plan versus this was inviting feedback.
It was too finished.
Kind of counterintuitive. Exactly.
There's a good book called Creative Destruction about how the iPhone was built via demo engineering, basically showing Steve Jobs demo after demo versus just like plans and schedules. And I think demos actually do a bunch of things. One, it does have an execution component, like, hey, what am I going to show this week? Like, and it has a co-opetition component. Whoa, that team built this in a week, and our team didn't get that far in this week. It has an optometrist component. Do you like this better for this week? Like, you like A or B, C or D? And with a series of interactions, you can kind of land on the same thing, land on the right thing. And so all of those things kind of help you because you're showing the collateral versus showing the plan. And so a lot of times when I tell people, I'm like, oh, just show me the thing. Like we try to tell people, just bring up the code or show me the design or show me the thing. Don't show me the plan. Don't show me the status report. Just show me the thing.
Related to this, I've seen the word subtraction a lot around Shopify folks. And then, also in your Twitter, you value simplicity versus complexifiers and stuff.
Yeah.
So how would you explain that to the CEO?
Yeah. So the interesting thing is, I don't know if it's only about founders, but it's one of the things founders tend to do better than a lot of other types of executives. Is because when something comes into a company, whether it's a process or whether it's a type of role or it's a type of customer, like it's hard to remove. Like once you add, like here's a good example. Someone comes to work one day and they don't have sleeves on their t-shirt. Okay, I come in with no sleeves. Lots of things you could do, right? Shopify come in and be like, oh my god, Farhan has no sleeves. We should have a dress code. Then there's policy, and then like, how hard is it to remove a dress code policy? Like impossible, because once a policy's in, it's super hard. And so instead, kind of a couple things to do. One, instead of putting a policy, you just talk to the person. Say, hey, tomorrow, like sleeves, right? Like you don't have to fix one person's error with a policy. But the second thing is, it's usually only a founder who can come in, and I hope a lot of other executives do this too, but who can come in and remove a policy. So there's this idea of like, can we remove rules? And subtracting is like, can we delete something because it doesn't make sense anymore, or start over in our thinking? And it tends to be more, I don't know why, founder driven that I've seen than like executive driven. But a big unlock for a lot of companies is deleting rules, deleting process. Right? Like Elon has this line, process is not a substitute for thinking. Right? Like here's a good example. We would interview the interns after they finished their internship for a full-time job. And I was like, we just did a 4-month interview. Like they worked here for 4 months. Like, what are you interviewing them for? Like, oh, but that's the process because we interview all the full-times, want to have the same interview. I'm like, but what are you trying to learn? You have 4 months of real work. And so, like, luckily I just went in and deleted that part of the process, but it was there. And the reason it was there is because like it was the process. And sometimes, and by the way, you need process and you need people who are good at process. You need people who like can help like build a good process. But it was in this case a mistake because it was not the person. They weren't thinking about what we were trying to learn. We were trying to learn if this person is a good fit for Shopify. We had 4 months of data. We had a manager. We had teammates. We had code in the engineering sense, and we could just use that. And so now we do. Right. The other thing we say in Shopify, by the way, is process can only be added if it makes something that was not possible now possible, or something 10 times better. Otherwise, process is not allowed. So dress code, is it going to make something possible that was not possible or 10 times better? No new process.
Nice. You mentioned interns a few times, and I'm kind of annoyed to see people are moving away from hiring like fresh grad talent or interns, and they think like AI is going to do that work. Whereas I learned so much about AI from my cousins who are in university right now. Yeah. Like how they're hacking the system is really inspiring. So what's the advice on like hiring more junior talent versus the other way around?
Well, I mean, like I've always been a fan of junior talent, as you know. And the reason is because they're growing up in a different generation than us. And so you want to make sure that you get people who, in this case, let's take the example of right now, who are AI native. They're growing up with AI tools. They're coding with Cursor and Claude Code and Windsurf. Like they are a different generation. And so you want that in your company. So I think some people mistakenly think of interns as like some charity. Oh, we have to give back to the community. Let's hire interns. It's good for them. And like, yay for us. Like it's not the case. You will learn more from the interns than they will contribute. They will push your full times. They are hungry. They are intense. They want to work hard. They want to get a full-time job or work somewhere else and have great experience in doing that. So we need to have them. And so at Shopify, we hired 1,000 interns this year. We're hiring 1,000 next year. And part of my mandate, you saw Cloudflare go out and say they're hiring 1,000 interns. I spent a bunch of time with their leadership team saying, here's why you should hire 1,000 interns. And so I'm spending, if anybody watches this and needs convincing of their senior leadership team, I'm happy to talk to you about why you should hire more interns than you already have. But in our case, for example, we have 3,000 engineers. And we have about 300 and something interns a term, so about 10%. We get great value from them. We hired over 100 of them full-time this year. And so it's a pipeline. It's smart people. It changes the demographic of how engineering works. It pushes AI native. I even said in the job description, they're AI centaurs. Actually, the strange thing, too, the culture is different, right? Because I want interns to have a cohort. So we're a remote company, but I make the interns come into the office because I want them to have a cohort of physical people that they can rely upon, make friends, learn from each other in a IRL way. And of course, when they make them full-times, they don't have to do that anymore because we're a remote company, but they might choose to. Maybe they feel like they learn. I'm in the office today. They might learn better IRL.
And it checks both boxes, right? Like it makes something possible that wasn't possible and definitely can give you the 10x there.
Of course.
Next one is don't be afraid of looking stupid, even if you're the CEO or leader.
I wrote an article about this. I mean, I'm the king. I mean, I'll give you a good example from literally the meeting before this. We were going through with Mikhail, our CTO, and Nell, our head of data, a bunch of charts and data analysis across some of our metrics at the company. And they were having a great debate. And I was watching and I was like, I don't understand this as well as I should. And so as they were talking, they were debating, without the chart present. So I pulled up the charts that I had and even realized that, number one, I was looking at the wrong dashboard. So they sent me the right dashboard. I pulled that one up and it was clear that I didn't know where they were going. And I'm like, wow, I need to know this better. So I just put myself out there and said, hey, everybody, just so you know, I'm not able to contribute well to this discussion because I don't know these charts as well as I need to. So I'm going to take that away. And somebody else was like, me too. And they were like, okay, so let's set up a session and go through this in detail because we could not have an intelligent debate. But I think my personality is one of I just don't care. I'm like, hey guys, I don't know what you guys are saying. I need to go deeper. And everybody else put their hand up too. But I'm usually one of the first ones to go like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I want to learn. So I will take I look stupid. I don't care about that part. I want the learn part every single time. And this happened even in Slack today when somebody said, oh, we moved funds from A to B. And I go, what do you mean by funds? Like dollars, marketing spend, like people, like what do you, I'm like, sorry, super dumb question. I don't know what they're like, oh, not dumb at all. Here's the thing. And I'm sure 10 other people were like, I didn't know what funds meant either. So I just don't care because I want to learn. So it's not a flex. It's like it's just like a dumb learning. It's super annoying, I think, to people. I don't know. I just keep doing it.
I'm glad I heard this. In December, I went back to learning piano. It's just
amazing
something for me to do. And in December, I've got a recital, and it's going to be me and 10-year-olds.
Yes, I love
like
it.
The movie Jack.
I love it.
Cool. As we wrap up, something that I like to ask everyone is, what's a product that you bought recently, or your team got to experience, or even at home that just blew your way?
I forgot what I said last time because I feel like I'm.
It's a chessboard.
Chessboard. Okay, I have that chessboard, which is all still amazing, by the way. I have a friend who's a grandmaster who came over and we used that board he was analyzing some of my old games. But anyway, I have this. I'm going to buy the new ones, but I still have Meta Ray-Bans as one of my top picks. And the reason for it is, one, especially in this time of year, you don't need to bring your AirPods. So I just walk around with sunglasses and now I can take calls. I can listen to podcasts and I don't have to carry like an extra device because I carry sunglasses anyway in the summer. That's one. But then two, I was playing soccer with my kids and I just hit the record and they didn't know I was recording. And I got the footage that you would never get, which is like I was the goalie and my kids taking shots on me. They were deking in front of me. My daughter was actually eating like an ice cream beside us. And I looked around and I was like, and the video is so surreal to capture an exact moment. Like I remember exactly what was happening. And it's so different than pulling up your phone. Like it just, they act differently, like you said, when you're being recorded. And so there's so many, I walked my daughter to school and I hit record one time and she's telling me a story and I was like, I'm going to remember this exactly as it is. And it's so good at capturing. And I will for sure. I was going to buy the V2 and then I saw the new one, which is like the one with the display. I'm 100% buying it on September 30th.
Another thing I'd like to know is what is a novel way that you've seen someone at home or work use AI that seemed counterintuitive or you may not have gotten to by linear extrapolation?
Yeah, one of the things I started doing myself, and I've just noticed other people have been watching me, is there's obviously so much content on YouTube. And YouTube doesn't give you a super easy way to like transcribe, like, hey, find the most counterintuitive ideas in this podcast. Or I like to watch a lot of these videos myself, and I tend to do like a 1.5x or a 2x. But I mean, the latest one was a chess one, actually. It was in Russian, I think converted to English, about one of Magnus Carlsen's like premier like chess trainers. And it was an hour-long interview about Magnus Carlsen. And it didn't make sense to me to watch it in Russian for an hour. I was like, okay, but what can I do better? And so I literally do this weird thing where I like hit transcript, I do a control A, I dump it into ChatGPT, I trim manually, which I probably should have a workflow for, manually all the extraneous shit around the transcript. And then I come up with and it's almost like putting in Notebook LM, but I put it in ChatGPT and I ask it questions. Like I'm like, hey, what are the most counterintuitive things that I could learn about how Magnus Carlsen learns chess from this like interview or whatever? But what I found was most interesting was I have a chess WhatsApp group because I'm a nerd. And I shared the link to the ChatGPT conversation in the group. And while people enjoyed reading the insights, they were like, I love how you interrogated the LLM. So they were watching more. I didn't think that was going to, I thought, oh, here's the highlights from this conversation. And instead they said, oh, I like watching you talk to the LLM.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, wait a second. They're like, yeah, I don't, that's not how I use it. I'm like, oh, well, how do you use it? So it's that idea of almost like, I guess, remote async pairing, because they're seeing me use the tool. And then of course, when they share read links, I've realized now I don't just look at the output, I look at their prompts, right? Actually, I'll give you one more. I was in a meeting, and I at the end of the meeting, I will say, summarize the meeting to Gemini. And I asked somebody else, they were still in the meeting. I go, what are you doing? They go, I'm summarizing the meeting. I'm like, oh, what's your prompt? And they had summarize the meeting, tell me the takeaways, give me the key insights, they had a long prompt. And I took my prompt, and then I took their prompt, and I asked the same question. I put them in a Google Doc, and I read mine and read theirs. And at the onset, I was like, wow, theirs was like way more detailed and super long. Yep. And mine was like a paragraph. And I was like, wow, their prompt's so much better. And then I sat down and I said, wait a second. And I read it fully, like in full brain power read. And I was like, that had no more extra content. It was 2 pages long, but there was not even one detail that was improved upon for my small paragraph. So I went back to the person and said, by the way, my summarize this meeting has a shorter 4-line, 4 bullet point response. Yours was 2 pages. I have the same content in mind. And they said, thank you for telling me. They're not going to do that anymore. So we learned that, by the way, in this case, for this Gemini in that meeting, summarize this meeting with 4 bullets, whatever, was much better, higher signal than the super long thing that had all the sections.
That's amazing. Well, hey, man, I know we're wrapping up here. Wanted to say thanks for making time. And also, as a little note, there's this book, Unreasonable Hospitality. Ooh. And it's this guy, I think you'll like it. It's about customer experience. And there's this cool story about a hot dog that I think you particularly enjoy.
Yeah. Okay.
And the guy basically, he runs a Michelin star restaurant in New York. And they won the world's 50 best restaurants. The first time they were invited, he came number 50. And then he's like, okay, that's nice, but and he wrote down on a napkin that he wants to be number 1. So he wrote down his goal and everything. And then his synthesis afterwards, as he reviewed the list in order to try and figure out how to become number 1, because you and I are going to have our favorite restaurants in the world. So how do you pick the best 50, right? Was he said, hey, you know what? The restaurants that top the list, it wasn't around the subjective stuff. It was around how much they changed other restaurants around the world and how they approach food.
Yeah.
And I think what you guys are doing out in the open is really changing the way that product teams outside of a big consumer internet giant get to change the way we build software. So appreciate that you guys are doing this all out in the open and how you're putting your opinions out there.
Cool. Well, happy to chat. And again, I'm doing this so I can learn from other people, and the questions help me learn how other people are thinking about it. So
awesome, man. We'll have a bunch of show notes, including Twitter, how people can get a hold of you. We'll see you.
Thanks, man.
See ya. Hope you enjoyed that episode with Farhan Thawar from Shopify. They've been a company that I've been fascinated with for a variety of reasons. On the outside, we can see that time and time again, they are at the forefront of inventing change for the industry rather than reacting to change. Now consider this. On the very day that OpenAI turned on their buy-in chat feature, just a few weeks ago in September of 2025, Shopify's merchants, their customers, were already live. You no longer have to copy a link from ChatGPT into your browser or click through. You ask, you find in ChatGPT, and then you buy. That's a great example of a sharp break from how commerce traditionally works, and it represents a direct challenge to Amazon and Google and reshapes maybe what the word marketplace is going to mean. To understand how bold this is in some perspective, Farhan mentioned that Shopify has around 3,000 engineers and 10% of them are interns. Meanwhile, I think Amazon has over 35,000 engineers in their workforce. So more than 10x. And Amazon's scale is massive. Their resources are deep. So for a company like Shopify to consistently punch above its weight, the advantage clearly isn't just about scale alone. It's speed, it's intention, and it's a culture of enabling their team. So how does Shopify do it? Here are some hunches that I have or some trends that I've seen on pillars that let them take on a behemoth like Amazon and win new battles. The first one is mission first innovation as opposed to tech for tech's sake. Shopify's core ethos that we're seeing here long predates AI. They're built around empowering merchants, reducing friction, and giving people tools to build. And I think that foundation matters because when you already know what you stand for, you can lean in a lot easier into new tech in service of that mission, and your team is already aligned. This avoids chasing shiny objects or finding yourself having a solution looking for a problem to solve. It's a conversation I'm oftentimes having with leaders, business owners, founders, to start with the type of change you're looking to make in the world, and then and only then ask how AI can de-risk or accelerate that, not the other way around. The second thing is around democratizing tooling and giving access versus gatekeeping as leaders. We've seen Shopify with a track record of making powerful tools, but also making them accessible, not even just to the engineers, but the entire organization and even to their customers. Farhan's early move on GitHub Copilot is a perfect example. He negotiated access for his team for the AI coding assistant before GitHub apparently even was ready to charge them for it. This let his team build fluency while the rest of the world hadn't even heard about it yet or was still waiting to get access. On the merchant side with their customers, there's features like Shopify Flow that allow everyday store operators to build automation without any technical background. Their developer platform and APIs also reflect the same philosophy. Don't just build features, build platforms that people can extend and customize. This democratization of tooling means that innovation isn't throttled or have to wait in a queue. Ideas are constantly bubbling up, and you get emergent capability across the organization, not just top-down mandates. Number 3 is a culture of experimentation that prioritizes learning, built in and not bolted on. Shopify frames learning as a first-class priority, and we've seen this in many ways. The last time Farhan was on, he mentioned how any engineer can delete any code if it preserves the insight, and what they lose in lines of code, they gain in clarity. That's something really powerful to enable your team to do that. They also recognize that innovation has phases between exploration and later in maturity. And they don't expect the same level of cost savings and efficiency from AI like they do by standardizing mature tools like Notion or Confluence and other SaaS vendors. And I love how they manage both intentionally. They even have what's reported as a thinking club led directly by their CEO, where Tobi meets with employees to debate mental models, question assumptions, and surface new ideas. And I'll concede I copied that idea directly and introduced a thinking and learning club at Integral that I participate in myself. And for Shopify, this probably means that they're constantly adapting and a key source of that. Speaking of leadership and the CEO, they model from the top with no exceptions to the rule. There's a leaked memo from their CEO, Tobi, in April that made headlines. He declared that no one is exempt from the expectations in that mandate, not even himself. Some of the other things in the memo that we've also done an episode that I'll link in the show notes is that every role must justify why it can't be enhanced with AI before hiring more humans. He talks about how performance reviews will include a section for how effectively people are using AI, and that learning, experimentation, and AI fluency are no longer negotiable values at Shopify. When leaders model that, whether it's admitting mistakes, sharing how they use AI themselves, asking for help, it really sets a tone. And it's something I've seen in many organizations where the CEO, being a curious learner who does it out loud, gives others permission to experiment and fail as well. So here's a few things that I want you to reflect on.
The first is starting with what change you really want your company to make in the world, and think even 10 years out. Then and only then ask where AI can help. And then wonder what's stopping you from giving your team access to the tooling they need to help them accelerate or de-risk achieving that vision. Are you gatekeeping innovation or are you enabling it? And then, does your culture fear failure or does it reward iteration and experimentation? And lastly, I gotta ask you, how often as a CEO do you use AI to think, to decide, to research? And how often do you show your team what you learned? And better yet, how often do you ask them for advice on how they'd be able to think, learn, or research better with AI than you are? Because this story from Shopify isn't just about GPT or AI or features. It's about building a company that learns faster than anyone else. If you want help making that your company's story, I'd love to soundboard with you alongside my team. Hit us up on our social media DMs or head to convergence.fm and that contact page, and someone will be right back in touch with you. And we'll be back next week, as always, on convergence.fm with another episode talking about how to foster engaged teams who ship delightful products like Shopify does. We'll see you then. Thank you for joining me on the Convergence Podcast today. Subscribe to the Convergence Podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your content. If you're listening and found this helpful, please give us a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button and tell me what you think about what you heard today.